Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Josh.
And this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 71.
Episode 71. Ben, I like 71. And do you know why?
I don't.
Okay, because
There's nothing significant about the number 71.
There's something significant about every number, dude. Numbers mean things, just like words. No, 71 is important because that's the number of different characters that you can type using a standard English keyboard.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's more buttons than 71, but if you look at all the letters and the symbols and the numbers, we're not counting uppercase and lowercase. That's the same character. But like all the characters that you can create using a normal keyboard is 71.
Okay, cool. I mean, that's if you don't count things like holding down the right Alt key and typing a 4-digit ASCII code, but I get it.
Only nerds know ASCII, Ben, and we're not talking about all the different ASCII codes that you can generate.
Awesome. Well, we are nerds, and I think some of our listeners are nerds because we got some corrections from some nerds this week, and I loved it.
Oh, Ben, I did not love it. Like this one. Hey, can I start? Because I want...
Okay, first of all, thank you to Reddit listener Jim, who gave us a couple corrections. We're going to take a few minutes to talk about those now. Now, the first one came up last time because you and I... First, before we get into that other thing that you're upset about, let's talk about web browsers. Because you brought up the fact that Google had changed the way that Chrome was configured, and that was irking you. So we had two listeners both chime in about this. One offered their condolences, and the other offered assistance. Now, Reddit listener Jim said that this is something they call in the corporate world moving cheese. And I like this phrase, so I'm introducing it to our vocabulary. Moving cheese is, he said, people hate it when you move their cheese. So this is a product you use, and for whatever reason, like you said, they may be trying to convince you of that reason. They changed something, and you don't like it because they moved your cheese.
Well, yeah, this is something that would make me want to stick with like that build of Chrome. Like if I wasn't a computer scientist and understood all of the
don't
updates
upgrade, go back to the old one before they move my cheese.
Right. This is the same reason you wear the Air Max 95s instead of the Air Max, like, what is it, 22 now? Like,
right.
Do they have new models of the Air Max?
Kinda.
Right, but you stick with the one that you want.
Right. But unfortunately, with web browsers, they also wrap in things like security updates that make you invulnerable to common exploitations that could cause your computer to get hacked. So you kind of have to take the good with the bad here.
Well, that goes back to the whole our corporate overlords get to dictate how we use their products nonsense again. Can I opt in to the security updates and opt out of what you think of as functionality updates, Google?
So Reddit listener Tweedlebeetle suggested that you could basically feel the same input with the autocomplete on forms if you just hit enter instead of tab. Have you had a chance to try that yet?
I have not had a chance to try that in any meaningful sense, like not like outside of a search bar. Because if you're in a search bar, like you're auto-completing with enter anyway. My fear is that I'm going to autofill the very first input field of a form, and hitting enter is going to submit the form before I have a chance to fill the rest of it out.
I get it. It's kind of counterintuitive. There must have been a reason, like I said. But once you get a chance to try out, let us know if it works. So Reddit listener Jim pointed out, and I did not know going into episode 70 that you are going to initiate a browser superiority debate. And I realize this is partially because you feel like the debate is over.
Well, yeah, whoever's debating, they're the losers that are wanting the recount. Like, sorry, everyone. The election, like it's over. Chrome has taken over.
So I posted a graphic on our Facebook page. Please like our Facebook page if you haven't, listeners. We put new content there almost every day. And every time a new episode comes out, we put a big old photo album with all the stuff we talked about during the episode. And you can join in the discussion there. But I put on our Facebook page a graphic that showed 20 years ago what the browser market was like, and then last year what the browser market was like, what the majority usage browser was. And there were two countries on the entire map in 2020 that didn't use Google Chrome as the most prominent browser.
And I'm a huge fan of that.
It was like Equatorial Guinea and Greenland. Equatorial Guinea, for some reason, their majority browser is Edge, and Greenland uses Safari. And I think I have a theory about that. It's just because they use iPhones and nobody has PCs. Or they're on whatever. It's not that many people. Now, here's the thing, Josh. I don't have the data behind that graphic that I put up, but I'm imagining if you were to show one of those moving data charts that the piece of the pie that is Chrome isn't more than half, It's just more than any other.
Okay, it's not. It doesn't have a majority. It has a plurality.
Right. Now, this market, once I kind of weakly tried to debate you and you felt like this was a solved problem, I looked into this, and there's a lot of reasons that you might not settle on a favorite browser. Browsers are such a, you spend so much time looking at them. There are privacy, compatibility, security, customizability, speed, inertia, the ecosystem, the interface, brand loyalty, plugins and tools, all of those things, and it's not just open and shut.
It is open and shut, and because
No.
the only one there that makes it all right. So there's privacy, which I can't speak to. I have not done my due diligence on the other browsers. I know Google is. I've given up on internet privacy, Ben. Like, the big companies know everything that they want about me. I carry around a listening device in my pocket.
I'm too boring to be worried about it. That's how I feel.
They've got everything anyway. Like, I'm sure when I bought my new phone that I agreed, like when I started up for the first time, I agreed that Google can listen to every word that I say, record it on my microphone, track my location and my purchases to send me better ads, whatever. It's just out there. I don't care. But the compatibility thing, I'm going to throw that out as the only people that care about compatibility is the government, because only the government is so slow to care about not being able to update their systems interface with anything else.
Okay, you're reminding me. Yes, that is so true. You don't even know. This week I spent way too much time worrying about compatibility with Internet Explorer 11.
Hang on. Before we go down that road, like, my wife works for the county in Maricopa County in Arizona. And one of the things that they're having problems with is they're getting rid of Microsoft Internet Explorer, and they're switching full-time to Edge. And all of their web-based systems only interface with Internet Explorer. And there's this huge laundry list of checklist items that you have to do on your system to make Edge compatible with older versions of things that were supposed to be for Internet Explorer. And, like, she had to tell the IT people, like, hey, are we looking at this? Is this something that we're thinking about before it actually happens?
Did someone actually try this before we announced our new strategy?
Are you trusting all of these $18 an hour, like, receptionist type people to do this 40-step checklist in the settings of their system?
Yeah. So in the market out there, the plurality is Google Chrome, but that includes things like Android phones. Which is why other browsers like Safari show up, because that's the default on iOS Apple phones. But you can get Chrome browser for an iOS phone. I don't know if you can get a Safari browser for an Android phone. Is that a thing?
Why would you? Like, I'll look it up right now if you want me to. But
yeah.
I'm not going to download that Apple virus onto my phone.
Here's the point I want to make. Sometimes people are part of an ecosystem. They have brand loyalty, or they just they have their own reasons that aren't necessarily based on the underlying technology or whatever, or those other things. We didn't even talk about a Tor browser, the Onion router.
Okay, so before you go on, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. I searched for Safari, and I got Microsoft Edge, Opera, Firefox, and then 3 things with the icon that looks like the Safari icon that are clearly not Safari.
Okay, so probably not, but people are preying on the fact that you might consider it.
Yeah, these look like malware.
Okay, and that's in like the Chrome App Store?
That's in the Google Play Store.
Android Google Play Store. Okay, all right. The point I want to make with all of this, and I'm not going to draw a conclusion to this. Some of our listeners even prefer other browsers. Edge is known for being very fast. Firefox is known for having a broad degree of compatibility. This is like the car market. The reason that we have dozens of auto manufacturers is because not everyone cares about the same. There's so many things that can be different about a car. There's a big enough market that you can support other auto manufacturers. Otherwise, we aren't just narrowing it down till we come to the one perfect form of the car and everyone buys that.
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying there. Like, we made the car comparison kind of. I was trying to make the car comparison because you kept saying, like, well, I don't care. I just want the user experience to be good. I'm like, well, if the user experience is the same across the board, then use the one that the guy who knows about the engine is telling you to use. But that was me probably being my brand loyalty to Google. Use Google Chrome. People, like Ben is not going to be definitive. I will be definitive. Use Google Chrome. But someday I hope that we transcend this whole browser war or like console war, all the different wars. Like, because all this is a window to the larger thing that we all want to get at, which is the internet. And hopefully that layer of it, that thing that you have to have in order to interface with all that data is going to get more and more transparent to the point where it really doesn't matter.
It kind of matters though, but our effort, I think the mechanism that exists to try to get us to where you're talking about is what's called open source. That we have a set of code out there that everyone kind of cumulatively works on together and agrees on that is the best thing, and no one really owns it. And it's just free for the taking, and when somebody makes an improvement to it, then other people can download the improvement, and together we build this better experience that hopefully is marching towards the ideal.
Right, and that's, I do know what you're talking about. That's kind of like the HTML standard or the CSS standard, like the guts, like the programming language that the internet uses to convey data and to be displayed on a client. What I'm talking about is the client piece, like the fact that we're interfacing with Google Chrome. The fact that we know what that program is called means that it's too involved in the process. That needs to be faded way out. It means way more transparent, so it doesn't, like, I don't want to have this conversation of which internet browser is the best. I want to have the debate about what part of the internet is the best. We don't even think about the browsers. I get that.
There was a time a long time ago before all of the underlying text display standards have been set and stuff, and there was a great degree of variability. And I think the advent of being able to browse the web on handheld devices really made it important that everybody adhere to one set of standards for how you define the formatting, so that it didn't matter what size or orientation of screen you were looking at, you would still get a relatively consistent experience for what a web page looked like. But when I say open source, I actually mean the ideal of free code that isn't owned by a corporation, that everyone works on in a cooperative fashion.
Yeah, but I'm never going to run a Linux box.
Yeah, but yes, but you can get Chrome for Linux. Google owns the code for Chrome. Microsoft owns the code for Edge, and they're not making it open source, but there are open source things available out there. There might even be an open source web browser. Let me see.
It's a delicate dance, and this is one of the biggest conversations I have with people that are diehard Apple product fans, is because there's a sliding scale of usability and then tweakability. I'm gonna call it tweakability, like the user's access to like the nuts and bolts, and the deeper that the system allows you to reach to tweak things, typically the more complicated it becomes to like set up and use, but it can be more custom if you do spend the time with it. This is why all the hardcore, like actual computer science nerds, like I'm barely one anymore, they have Linux downloaded on their box because they're like, oh, you know what? I think if I tweak the kernel just a skosh while I'm running this program, it'll be a little more efficient.
So in our community of IT professionals in the Air Force, there are the guys that still do that kind of thing. Why would you say that you stopped? Why aren't you that guy that also has Linux on your computer and uses an open source web browser?
It's a trade-off thing. And this is the reason that these corporations exist, to create closed source software and just give it to us en masse, because there are a lot of people that don't want to take the time to learn the intricacies of the system. And like I said, the more access that you have to the nuts and bolts, typically the less user-friendly it is, in the sense of, I just want to plug something in and get going.
Yeah. Yes. And that's actually the part that's meaningful to me. Like, I understand that there's almost like an idealism tax if you're a real adherent to like open source operating systems and web browsers and that kind of thing, where you don't get the curated, refined, focus grouped experience that you get if you buy a corporate product.
Now, all of this said, we're not going to talk about Linux, but apparently Linux is getting better. From what I understand, they have like easy one-click installation processes and app stores and everything now, but that still doesn't solve the wideband compatibility issues.
Right. So open source web browsers, Google publishes one called Chromium, which is similar and it has some of the same underlying architecture, but it's not the same thing. There's other ones, Waterfox, Basilisk, Pale Moon, and Brave are some of the big ones. Anyway, I'm saying, would you want an open source car? Like, would you 3D print the parts and assemble it yourself and download code for the operating system off the internet?
I think I would trust an open source automatic driving software more than I would trust like a corporation's driving software. Like, if you look at the man hours, the sheer amount of time that human attention is spent on open source software, it's insane. Like the real mainstream Linux builds have, millions of man hours poured into like optimizing and fixing from people all over the planet.
Yeah, and I think at the heart of that question that's being asked is what kind of tasks lend themselves to this crowdsource kind of approach and which ones don't. Because sometimes tasks really benefit from having very firm hierarchical organization for how they're carried out, and sometimes they don't. Like, for instance, one I remember was when there was that bombing at the Boston Marathon a few years ago. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And law enforcement was going about their standard hierarchical, who's in charge at the scene of the crime. We're gathering data, holding press conferences and assigning investigators and stuff like that. Well, meanwhile, because this thing had happened on the internet with live video and photographers present, there was a lot of information available, and the internet freaking crowdsourced this thing. And on Reddit, they actually discovered the culprit within just a couple of hours, with no one in charge, no one assigning tasks, just a bunch of people all working on the same task, kind of feeding off each other until they got to the right answer.
Yeah, that's going to be the future. We're just going to crowdsource these kinds of big problems, and not necessarily to people, but to like large pools of just artificial intelligence. Like, hey, neural network at some server farm somewhere, crunch on this problem for a minute.
Yeah, and like I said, some tasks lend themselves to that kind of approach, and some don't.
Man, we got really deep into like technology in the future, talking about like the fact that Chrome is the best browser. Listen,
so thanks, Jim, for reopening that debate. And I disagree with Josh. Chrome is not necessarily the best browser. It depends on what you care about. Just like cars, everybody drives different cars because there's different things they care about.
Ben, you have a favorite kid. You can't tell all the kids that you don't have a favorite. You have a favorite.
Josh, one of the lies that we tell ourselves that holds society together is you don't talk about that, even on your podcast.
All right.
Okay.
Can we get to the thing that really?
Yes. Okay. So thank you, listener Jim, for also bringing up the fact that I, as the meta person, when we talked about Spider-Man No Way Home, I was not prepared to talk about the complexities that are the corporate relationships surrounding the ownership of the intellectual properties in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Go ahead, Josh.
So I'm so mad at myself. And like, Jim, yes, thank you for calling me out on this. I need other nerds in my life to call me out because I actually so much. I need people to do it back to me just to knock me down a peg when I need it. But this hurts. Like, this went right to my core. And Ben will attest to all
Josh texted me. He's like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Oh.
Because I know this. And just in the moment, I didn't. So what Jim pointed out that was absolutely correct is that Sony owned the rights to Spider-Man. I said that Sony also owned the rights to X-Men and Fantastic Four. That is incorrect. Fox.
It was 20th Century Fox.
20th Century Fox actually owned the rights to X-Men and Fantastic Four in the same kind of deal that Sony had.
Yeah, over the last 2 decades or so.
But it is a very different animal because for a couple of reasons. One, the X-Men IP was very wishy-washy. As like, well, this character appears in both X-Men and Avengers comics. Is he an X-Men IP or is he Avengers
like
IP?
Quicksilver and
Scarlet Witch were a big deal when they showed up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because technically they are mutants. Right. They are more closely aligned to the X-Men comics than they are to the Avengers. They are in all the Avengers comics, but they're more closely aligned with the X-Men comics. This is why in the movies they never said the word mutant. This is why actually in the movies Scarlet Witch never had that little M thing on her face. That didn't show up until the end of WandaVision. That was
because they didn't own the costume.
Because that technically then crosses into the X-Men IP, which is technically not owned by Disney.
You know what, Josh? Why can't one company just buy all of this stuff and own it all, so that I don't have to try to keep track of all this?
Libertarian Ben. So that ended up happening. So obviously Fox got purchased by Disney. So the X-Men have come home, and I'm very, very interested to see.
I'm surprised there's not been an X-Men movie since then. What are they going to do?
I don't know. My hope is that they haven't released an X-Men movie because, one, they're working on it and it's going to be a big deal and they're trying to keep it secret until then, and two, they're trying to weave them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That would be just ideal.
I guess I'm a little bit disconnected from the X-Men universe, even though I've enjoyed it over time. But it gets kind of tiring that it's always the same old like mutants versus non-mutants conflict. Like get a new conflict. I made you do the stammer thing.
There's so much there. I don't know how. All right, so I have so many siege weapons against your ivory tower. I'm not sure which one to employ first. I'm gonna go with this one. You expressed how much you loved Hugh Jackman as Wolverine in those past movies. Yes. Were you aware that for a very long stretch, Wolverine was an Avenger?
Yeah, because he was in the cartoons that I watched as a kid.
Think back to all the Avengers movies, to the Civil War movie, to Endgame, to Infinity War. And
Would it have been useful to have Wolverine other than to threaten their tenuous grasp on a PG-13 rating?
Would it have been bad to have a character that is a serious downer as opposed to all of these lighthearted, like, let's get the job done type people?
Cynical reality check?
Yes. I think that could have played very well in that group dynamic.
Yeah, I think so too. I've always enjoyed what he brings. Other than the fact that it's kind of problematic to keep your rating down to, when they really did what Wolverine would actually do with adamantium claws, it became rated R pretty fast. And Logan is probably the pinnacle of the Fox X-Men universe movies.
Okay, the last attack that I'll make on your ivory tower is the idea that, so Magneto is the main protagonist, and he's the one that's all anti-human, or just, he's not so much anti-human as he is pro-mutant. And the reason for that is that character, that Magneto as a person, was a Jewish person that was in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And so this is the closest thing we have to really apt and really on-point social commentary about racism, about tribalism, about fear of the other.
I don't have a problem with that. I think sometimes they do it in a way that's so abstract when it's mutants versus non-mutants that it's almost like too safe. They're getting away with having this debate in an abstract way that doesn't actually grapple with it.
The story, but that's the filmmakers' choices that have existed in the past X-Men films.
Yeah.
Now, there's no reason that a good director and a good cast and a good writer can't make that very much more apt and like in tune with our current social strife.
Yeah, I was telling my wife I appreciated how in Black Panther they made the conflict kind of about like, what if you're in a prosperous high-tech society, do you have an obligation to share that with other people? Like, what an interesting question for a superhero movie to ask.
Yeah, like at what point are you responsible for enriching the lives of others?
Yeah. At what point do you as a society have the Spider-Man problem?
Yeah. And there's a lot of ways you can solve that problem. They're all equally apt, but it's, with great power comes great responsibility. How will you use that responsibility?
Yeah.
By letting Elon Musk buy Twitter, obviously.
All right. Well, those are some great examples of our listeners interacting with us as the show. Keep them coming. Thank you for interacting with us on Reddit and on Facebook. We appreciate the feedback. Like Josh said, you can actually us all day. We'll talk about it on the next episode.
Try to actually Ben more than me. I take it real hard when I'm wrong.
He texted me like 4 times. Speaking of you being right about things, Josh, now I know it's the end of April here as we're recording this, and tax season has just ended, has it not?
It has, yes. So for those of you who are not aware, in the United States, federal taxes are due on April 15th, normally on a normal year. Federal taxes, for you wonderful countries where you don't have income tax, is where the government expects you to send them basically high school math homework.
Aren't state taxes also, don't they just align them with the federal tax deadline?
Most do, some don't.
Okay.
Some states don't have income tax. That's a whole different ball of wax.
All right. Yeah, but if you're explaining this as if you're talking to listeners who are foreigners, that's an important fact that I did not realize till I went to Italy and England, that they don't understand about the United States of America. They think of it as one place. They don't understand what it means to be the United States of America.
Oh, okay.
So for our foreign listeners, not only do we pay taxes to the federal government, we also pay taxes to a state government.
Honestly, the United States is a lot more like the European Union than like you can't compare like the United Kingdom to the United States. That's not a one-to-one comparison.
You need to compare the European Union to the United States.
Yes, where you have the European Union that has jurisdiction and some level of law enforcement over certain things, but then also you belong to that country that does things. Think of every state in the United States as its own little country with the governor as the king. So yes, we have federal taxes that we have to pay. We also have state taxes, and some states are different. Some states conform with the federal laws, some don't. It's all over the place.
So the majority of your work is focused around that deadline. So the 15th is passed, and you're back to normal working hours, and everything's fine, right?
Kind of. I don't just, we're an accounting firm, not just a tax firm, Ben.
I get it.
So there's all these business things that have to happen. There was a bunch of stuff that was due in April. This next month I've got to catch up on all of our contracts, and then we've got to transition a bunch of payroll. Like I've still got stuff to do, but yes, in general, my required 6-day week, 48-hour working weeks are now over, and I'm back to my flexed 40 hours, and it feels so good.
Nice. So now your time is free that you can finish studying for your last 2 sections of your CPA exam?
Actually, my last one section, because
one.
I took the 3rd test earlier this week on Monday. So that was 4 hours of just the worst. It's always the worst. It's like, hey, sit down at this computer. You're allowed to go to the bathroom once for 5 minutes. You have 4 hours. Here's the hardest questions about the most esoteric things. Ready, go.
Yes. Do you have the results yet?
Nope. The results won't come out until the end of May.
Oh, jeez.
So I took this week off from studying because I just needed, like with tax season and everything coming to a head all at the same time, I just needed a week just down. So
that's awesome, man. You've only got one left. You've done the hardest ones already.
Yes. So now I'm going to start studying for the next one next week. I need to pass this next one, and hopefully I pass the last one. They have to be done before Thanksgiving this year. That's when the credit from my first test expires.
Right. So you have to do all 4 of them within a calendar year of each other. So once you pass the first one, you started the clock for the last one?
It's like 18 months, but yeah.
Okay.
Once you pass the first one, started the clock for the last one. And so, knock on wood, hopefully I pass this last one, because I'm going to start studying for the next one without realizing or not. And if I didn't pass it, then I've got to put that studying on pause, re-cram for the 3rd one, and then retake the 3rd one at some point.
And this is the tax accountant equivalent of like passing the bar.
Yes. I don't want to draw any comparisons to that, because lawyers will actually me. Don't at me, lawyers. Like, I don't know how hard it is to pass the bar. For every state, again, every state is different for what you need to do to become an accountant. In my state, I have to have a master's degree or equivalent in accounting. I have to have 2,000 hours actually working as an accountant. And I have to pass all 4 of the uniform federal level tests.
Okay. Wow. Well, I'm sure you'll be glad to have that done. We'll celebrate that on this show.
That will be the last academic thing I have to do in my life, Ben, knock on wood. And
now,
that'll be done.
Speaking of things that we do on this show, Josh, in the past, you've given me a hard time for how long it took me to adopt smartphones. And then you texted me this week of something that you were doing for the first time that absolutely floored me, that it is the year 2022 and you had never used contactless payment before. Is that true?
That's true. I blame the fact that I bought my last phone in like 2000 and I don't even know, 16 or something. I think that was the last phone that I had.
Okay.
And I remember trying to set it up once and it didn't go well, and I just abandoned the idea entirely and never thought about it again ever.
So what was your default method? Was it a swipe card or a chip and pin card? Or
I was required to do, all the cards transitioned to chip. I was issued new cards that had the chip. And if it has the chip, you can't swipe it. They don't like that. So I've just been using the chip card for years and years now.
Chip and pin. Okay, now you guys shop, like you do the online grocery shopping and you get a lot of stuff on Amazon. So you're already kind of doing contactless in a way, in that, you're utilizing some type of secure web browser that has your credentials cached and validates your identity with some kind of biometric or password. And then you have access to your money without having to swipe a card.
Oh yeah, no doubt. 99% of the purchases I make are online, and I don't have to ever deal with actually pulling my card out of my wallet.
But like a gas station, or if you did have to make a run to the grocery store, you were still using chip and pin. So what happened? What changed?
Do people still go to the gas stations? I just plug my car in every night.
Oh,
people
I forgot.
Charge theirs?
Yes.
Yes, I have an electric car, and it's been wonderful. Sorry, I was high on my horse there for a second.
How do you know if Bad Magic co-hosts have electric cars?
They'll tell you.
Oh, they'll tell you.
Listeners, I bought an electric car, and it's wonderful. I forgot what your question was. Like,
I
contactless
asked
payment?
you, like, did your credit card company just send you one of those contactless cards out of the blue without you having asked for it? Like, what changed your behavior?
My new phone. So while I was going through
the foldy one.
The foldy one. So here's what happened is I'm OCD. And I downloaded another app for just whatever reason. Like, oh, I need this app. I forgot. I didn't download it from my old phone. I use it sparingly, but I need it now. Downloaded it, and it was the only app that rolled over to the third page on the app screen.
Oh, okay. I see why that triggered your OCD-ness.
And so I'm like, okay, well, something's got to go. And that made me do a hard look at every app on my phone because it was App Survivor. And one of them.
Wait. The third page with your phone unfolded?
Yes.
You had so many apps that with your phone unfolded, you went on to 3 pages? Do you have any subfolders?
Don't judge me, Ben. I can have whatever apps I want.
Wow.
They're down to 2 pages and they're going to stay there. Stop it.
Okay.
Don't app shame me. Freaking Apple iPhone user. Get out of here.
Okay, so how?
Well, I was going through it and downloaded already on the phone, like pre-installed, was Google Pay. And I was like, you know what? I never readdressed this. Let me look at this. And my biggest question was, are there fees for me, the user? And the answer is no. All the fees are on the merchant's end if they want to use that. And so I was like, oh, yeah, sweet. Let's do this. And yeah, I'm glad that I wasn't an early adopter. I didn't pay any early adopters tax for this. Ben, it took me like 3 minutes to link my all my payment methods to Google Pay. And they made it super easy. And it's like, oh, what card do you want to link? And like, oh, you already have a payment method saved in Google. Is it this one? Yes, it's this one. We see this is a USAA card. Do you have let us transfer you over to USAA. You can authorize everything. And like it knew I already had the app installed and it transferred to the app. It was all seamless. Put in all my passwords and pins and did my biometric thing. And like I said, 3 minutes later, and it's like, yeah, next time you're somewhere you need to pay, just put your thumb on the fingerprint scanner, drop your phone onto the payment thing, and it'll be fine. And the first time I used it was at buying my Chinese food lunch on Friday, and I was shocked at how fast it was compared to putting the chip into the machine and letting it crunch the numbers for 30 seconds.
Yeah, it just goes bing, and then it shows you a receipt on your screen. Yes,
that was... I used it once on Friday. I'm like, oh, well, I'm never pulling my card out of my wallet again.
Yeah. Now, it's funny that you say that kind of facetiously almost, but to me, I can't overstate the degree to which I am reluctant now to pull my card out of my wallet. I will drive farther to get to a gas station I know will allow me to use contactless payment. I will forego stores that I know don't offer it yet if I have another option.
This is the second day that I've had contactless payment, all right? And we went out to lunch and I paid there. We went to the outlet mall to buy new shoes for the kids. I used it there. Then we went to the movies, and I'm at the movies and I've got my phone. I'm like, oh, I'll just drop the phone here. And it goes, oh, we don't have Apple Pay. I'm like, it's Google Pay? He's like, we don't have Google Pay either. We don't have any of the pays. And I was grumbly. I was like, oh, well, I've got my phone back in my pocket and get my wallet out. And then and I realized in the moment, I've been using this for 24 hours and I'm already mad that I can't.
Yeah. Louis C.K. did a great persona non grata that he is, did a great routine about how he was on an airplane that had Wi-Fi and it was like, he couldn't believe what a wonderful miracle this was. And then during the flight, it went down and the guy next to him was like, can you believe this crap? He's like, we didn't have this before. It's a miracle.
You're flying through the air and accessing all of human knowledge. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
How quickly we take things for granted.
So I love it. Now, there's still some places where the system hasn't caught up with itself. Let me tell you about this. sometimes when you try to use a contactless payment, their system, for whatever reason, will generate a piece of paper, and the ill-trained, poorly paid employee will require you provide a physical signature on that piece of paper. I don't blame that person, but I do blame whoever programs their system for not understanding the validation that has occurred. They don't need my signature on a piece of paper. They don't have anywhere to validate it against anyway. They don't realize that this digital device that I just used to authenticate my bank account number also used 2 factors of authentication that are way more secure than my signature on a piece of paper.
Yeah, that is a little archaic, isn't it? Because
Yes.
I've had to sign my name twice this week, and now I'm thinking about it. Like, what are they going to do with that? What is that like? Is that
makes me grumbly for 2 reasons. 1, because we're killing trees, and 2, because they don't know what's happening.
Well, I feel like this is like I already gave you my card. It already ran through the machine. The machine printed out. Like, what is this? My pinky promise? Oh, I extra like cross my heart, hope to die. Like, I'll totally pay this. You've already got my money.
That makes a great transition to what I want to talk about next. So I know you talked on this show about your family's transition during COVID to online grocery shopping, where you would just go onto the grocery store, put in your order, pull into the parking spot, let them know you're there. They bring out your groceries, put them in the car. You don't have to interact with people. You don't have to breathe the same air as people. Everything was good.
I picked up groceries from the grocery store today, and Ben, I will tell you, they have it's like a 10% error rate of like getting stuff that we didn't order, stuff we ordered last time. Too many of this thing. They said they didn't have this, but they gave us 3 of them. Like, and it's noticeable, but not bad enough to make me want to go into the store.
Yeah, it's funny how those trade-offs occur in our life when we get something new. Like, for instance, this week I ordered on the Papa John's app. There's not a Papa John's closest to my house, but there is a Domino's, but I prefer Papa John's. So like on the one night a week when I don't feel like cooking, and I'll pick up pizza. So I just ordered it as I was leaving work. I pulled up and they were just finishing the pizzas as I pulled up. I ordered pizzas. They handed me 3 boxes. I never open the boxes and look at the toppings. So I take the boxes, I put them in my car, I'm on my drive home, and I get about halfway home, and my phone rings, and I don't recognize the number, but it's the local area code, and I don't get junk phone calls from the local area code. So I answer it, and it's a guy from the pizza place, and he's asking me to check the toppings on my pizzas.
It's the pizza police. You had it right the first time.
He's like, sir, you ordered such and such a pizza, but I think you might have one that with its other toppings on it. And I was kind of like, I was doing the calculation in my head. I'm like, look, man, I'm not turning it around to come back and bring you this pizza and swap it for the one you got there. Do whatever you want.
No, hang on a second. If I'm hey, sir, sorry, your pizza's 5 minutes late. We had to flag down a guy who put it in his car and drove off with it. We had to get him to come back and give it back to us. Like, no, Josh, that's not a thing.
Josh, I had been driving for at least 10 minutes before they called me.
Yeah, so God only knows what you did. God only knows what you did to that pizza in those 10 minutes, Ben. That's my point.
Yeah, no, they don't. I don't think they intended to give it to him. I think the problem they were trying to rectify was to give me the one I paid for so that I didn't get home and have the wrong one and get mad at them.
Oh, because you are flagged in their system. This is not the first time you've caused a kerfuffle.
You're right. This is the
John's.
Same store that I also... Yes. Okay. Anyway, all that being said, the point I wanted to make about was that I used an app to order, and just like you were saying with your grocery orders, there was an error. I don't know why. It seems like there should be less errors, not more, but you're taking a task and putting it on someone with less care.
Yeah, I mean, they're busy. The guy just does what's on the screen, and there's a lot of pizzas and a lot of moving pieces. It's easy to make mistakes. I get it.
Yeah, or your groceries. Like last time you talked about how you got the wrong kind of Dr. Pepper, and you're like, I've never tried this kind before. I guess I'll try it.
Yeah, and that's still an acceptable Dr. Pepper flavor that I will take from them. How was your pizza? What kind of toppings did you get?
It was Canadian bacon on top, I think instead of sausage, which is close enough and fine. But they'd also done this weird thing where it was like stuffed crust, but it didn't just have cheese. It had pepperoni wrapped around the cheese, wrapped in the crust.
You had a pizza that they rolled up and they made it into the crust of another pizza.
Yeah, it was too much. That's insane. Like, what are they doing?
We heard you like pizza, so we put some pizza in your pizza.
Yes. Okay. But what I said all that so I could tell you this. I know you're doing all those other new kinds of things, but have you ever done a like scan as you go kind of shopping experience?
Ooh. Now this is where like I would have a cart, and then I think I've tried this once at the grocery store. They have those little scanners. They might still where you have the scanner with you, and then you scan the stuff as you're putting it in the cart, and then you just check out. Like you don't have to scan anything. It's all the scanning's been done. You just pay when you get to the end, and then you walk out of the store.
Yes.
I have tried that a couple of times, and the entire time that I was doing it, all I could think of was people have got to be stealing so many groceries under this guise.
Okay, so this is something you and I have talked about before, and it is the idea that as a giant corporation, you're making a decision where the bottom line is just dollars. Yeah. And if it's dollars of how many employees you have to make sure that theft never happens, but then they also steal things, or it's dollars of people stealing things because they're scanning it and putting in their cart and they're putting in extra things. And what's the bottom line? Do I actually lose more dollars with that new way, or is it less? And if it's less, then okay, let's make the trade.
Okay. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Here's where I'm going with that. So in the only place right now within I love doing business this way. I prefer going to the store and getting it off the shelf to like doing like you do and sitting down at a computer and planning it out and putting it all in. But I hate waiting in line. I hate putting it all in my cart, taking it back out of my cart, having someone check it, putting it into bags, putting it back into my cart, putting it into the store. And the reason was when we moved to Europe, they were already way ahead of us on a lot of these things. When I moved to Italy in 2012, my local grocery store called Esselunga, which just means long S, had this thing where if you signed up, you got the scanner when you went into the store. And as you went throughout the store, you scanned it and put it into your cart. And then at the end, you just scan and pay and walk out. You don't take it out and put it back into your cart again. And then the way that they kept you honest is every now and then when you would scan it, instead of it just giving you the pay thing and having you pay, it would say proceed to the check station. And then you would have to go over there and it would take everything out of your cart. They'd scan it all and compare it to what you'd scanned with your scanner.
Every once in a while you'd get audited.
Yes. And it was random, and as I've established on this show, random is probably the best way to enforce the kind of behavior that you want. Now, like if people don't know when it's going to happen, they can't plan around it.
There's a lot to be said about was it really random, or was it like the foreign family from across the pond got audited like 3 times a week when nobody else got even looked at?
I get it, like random checkpoints for the TSA and stuff like that, but I was there, I saw it happen. It's based on your identity, as in when you get to the store, you scan your frequent shopper card that's tied to your ID. Now, what I don't know, because the fine print was all in Italian, is if you fail one of their audits, what happens after that? Like, do they slap you on the hand and give you a warning, and then after that suspend your scan and shop privileges? I don't know. It never happened.
I think the first offense is they brand like an L into your hand or something.
a long S. So we loved it. Like I preferred that store over everything because it saves you so much time. You don't have to wait in line at the checkout. You don't have to spend time taking stuff out of your cart and putting it back in. You're less likely to break it. So what we got is just these bags that would sit in our cart that we could just put the groceries directly into, cloth bags, so there was less waste, less impact to the environment, less time waiting in line. You just go through, you scan everything, you pay, you're gone. I loved it so much. We moved to England.
You're saying all the things that make it sound like you would love to pick up your groceries at the store, shop online, and then just have them delivered to you.
But I also like going to the market and picking out the best bunch of bananas that pleases me, or picking out the loaf of bread that looks the freshest, or kind of dig into the back of the milk case and picking out the jug of milk that has the most distant expiration date.
No. You do not get to be the guy that looks for the freshest loaf of bread, that digs for the newest milk, and then complains about waiting in line. Those two things can't exist in the same brain space.
Why?
It's like, I want to spend the extra 5 minutes to get, yes, here it is. This milk expires on the 29th, not the 28th. Ha! I win, grocery store. Oh, I can't believe I have to stand in line and wait for 10 seconds while this person bags their beans.
No, not 10 seconds. I waited in the line at Walmart for 45 minutes the other night. I am not even kidding. 45 minutes. I don't know what happened. This has never happened to me before. The guy in front of me, for some reason, the register glitched out just as he was paying, and the lady made him take an entire cart full of bagged groceries and run them across the belt again.
Why? So your first problem is you're shopping at Walmart. And your
Yeah.
second problem is you're not scanning the stuff yourself. Why haven't you go to the self-checkout, man?
Okay, because there's a.
I made you do the stammer thing. Look at this.
They might have used to have had a minimum item number limit, but there's like a practical limit. If you pull up to the self-checkout, there's no conveyor belt. Well, Walmart does have conveyor belts, but there's like the quick, what it used to be called, express lane self-checkout, where it's only good for up to about 10 items, and after that it gets unwieldy because the space that you put it in afterwards is kind of small, and the space on the other side of the register is kind of small, and you're crowded in by other people. It just doesn't work out really well.
I've solved that problem with multiple carts, but like, go ahead. Like, land your plane on the shopping.
So we moved to England, and they had a store called Tesco that had a similar thing. You check out a scanner when you go into the store, but this time, instead of doing the like audit where they do all the things, it would just do like a spot check when you got to the checkout. Check a couple of items, and if there weren't any issues, then pay and leave.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So when I came back to the States, there really is this like cultural morality thing going on. So it doesn't exist in most places. Like in Walmart, you still have to take everything out of your cart and either check it yourself or have someone else check it. And it's kind of sneaky, but with one of those self-checkout registers, there's a scale that's weighing your groceries.
Oh, I'm aware of that, and that's why it freaks out at you. It's like, oh, please put your item in the bagging area. Yes, I know you're weighing it to make sure that I'm not scanning cereal and putting a 12-pack of Coors Light in there.
Right, exactly. So that's all happening, and I don't know if it's based on just people's superstition or if it's actual based on the differences in behavior. But for some reason in Europe, they'll trust you with a few checks here and there, but in America, we aren't doing that yet, except for at Sam's Club. At Sam's Club, a big box, like a bulk store similar to Costco, they allow you to install an app on your phone that then you can scan the items as you put them into your cart, and then as you're headed for the door, you just swipe, pay for everything, and walk out the door.
So here's my question to you, Ben. Is in one calendar year, is there going to be enough shoplifting? Is it going to be more or less than the salary that you would pay to one full-time checkout person?
That's the question.
And
it must be that they save more by with whatever amount of theft there is. And here's how I know, because when I went this week, there was someone standing at the door, someone who's getting paid full time to stand at the door and tell people to sign up for Scan and Shop.
Sign up for this app. We don't mind if you steal. Just try to keep it under Jenny's salary. She's leaving next week.
So here's the other part I want to talk about I want to get your perspective on this because I think it'll be different than mine. The Scan and Shop app, when you swipe to pay, then it gives you your receipt and says you paid, and then it gives one of those 3D barcodes. I forget those
QR codes.
It gives a QR code, and then as you go out the exit, an employee scans it, and it kind of uploads your transaction into their device, and then they'll scan about 3 or 4 things in your cart.
Okay.
And as long as they
spot check thing again.
Yeah, spot check thing again. As long as there's no issues, then you get the green light. Your app tells you you're good to go, and they stop standing in your way. Well, about a month ago, the app updated and it added an extra protocol in. This is the part I want to talk about. Sorry it took so long. When you get to the exit and you're about to go up to the person and you swipe to pay, it tells you how many items you had added to your cart and says, you added 30 items to your cart today. Please verify that you have 30 items in your cart.
Okay. And it's just like a checkbox, like you have to agree to it before it lets you proceed with the transaction?
Yes. All right. So give me your perspective on why that was added in the update to the app. Alicia gave me hers. I had a different perspective than hers on it.
This is 100% legal justification if you were to go, like if they say that you're shoplifting. So this is just one more piece of evidence that they can lay on against you. Like if they say you're shoplifting, you say, no, I'm not. Now they have to justify to a third party, a legal organization, to say like, well, how do you know he was shoplifting? Well, for starters, he said there was 6 things in his cart and there's clearly 47. So like right there. So that's the only thing it can be, is that there was somebody that was caught like shoplifting or accidentally got too many items or whatever and got off for whatever reason. And so they feel like they had to add more legalese, or like the lawyers came up with more ways that they could indemnify somebody? Like, what else can we do to like make it absolutely your fault if you end up with the wrong amount of stuff in your cart?
Okay, I'm going to ask you a loaded question about this. Do you think the only possible situation where somebody would try to leave the door with a cart where they had errors in the cart is because they're trying to steal something?
No, there are absolutely totally innocent circumstances in which you would accidentally shoplift some things. For example, I don't have 100% full eye contact with both of my children the entire time that I'm grocery shopping. So if one of those kids thinks they're being sneaky and throws in a box of animal crackers, like, I might not catch it.
Okay, so let's say that happened. Let's say that exact thing happened. You went to the exit, you signed it, they did their scan check, and they scanned the animal crackers, and it said, boop, that wasn't in your cart. And you're like, oh, crap, I didn't know I didn't pay for that. How would you like them to handle that? Would you want them to suspend your privileges or just let you fix it on the spot? Or like...
I think the first time. Like, because this is an account-based thing. You're not just some random stranger off the street. They are tracking your identity across time. So if you're a first offense, I say they should send you to some hand checkout. They do a full audit of your cart and then let you know, like, hey, if this happens again, stricter things are going to happen to you. You pay the difference. Hell, maybe even pay like a minor penalty, like a $5, like you screwed up penalty. I don't know. Just some barrier to entry to try to, like, hey, stop it. But then the second, like, repeat offenders, then that's when you start talking about, okay, you don't get to shop here anymore.
So this happened once to a member of our family that wasn't me. My wife was shopping, and she bought, like, a box of prepackaged salads, and she'd scanned it, put it in the cart, and then she saw another one. She's like, oh, I actually like this other flavor better, and she swapped them, but forgot to make the change in the app.
Oh, so, like, let me guess, they tied her to a post and then started stacking kindling at the bottom of it to burn her in front of the rest of the store shoppers.
So she got to check out, they did the spot check, and they scanned the new box of salads that she'd put in there, and of course it wasn't on her transaction. And it was 18 cents different.
Okay, yeah, okay, there's also a common sense threshold where, like, guys, I'm within $1. Come on. It's the same item with a different name on it.
Right. Yes. So it was 18 cents more than she'd paid. So they let her fix it. I do not know what happened in their system as far as, like, is she now on the 1 strike and you're out list? Did they give you 3 strikes? You know, what happens? But here was my perspective on them updating the app so that it gave you a final check before you went through the doors. I think it's just like a good faith kind of thing. Like, this is already a good faith operation. This is like, hey, customer, we're going to trust you as much or more than we might have an employee because they were stealing from us too, just in sneakier ways because they're here long enough to figure out what the best ways to steal are. So in order to help you not make a mistake as you're trying to go out through the door, here's the number of things you put in your cart. Would you count before you go out and just make sure? And if not, that gives you a chance to fix it and everything's good. No harm, no foul.
You just have such faith in the goodness of the universe. And I don't know why. Like, this is the opposite of who hurt you. This is like, Ben, why do you have this feeling that, like, everybody's just out to help each other? Because that just doesn't happen.
I expressed that in terms where it sounded like it was goodwill, but it's also just good corporate business policy. Like, I want to do business with a corporation that's not trying to get me. Like, and if they're trying to make it easier for me to do the right thing, okay.
There is a Sam's Club marketing team that is high-fiving right now listening to this podcast. Like, yeah, this guy got it. This is exactly what we were going for.
It's better for them. It's better for me. Everyone wins here.
Any corporate CEO listening to this podcast, listening to my voice, listening to Ben's voice, this guy's getting out of the military in a short while. You need him on your spin team. This guy can make any amount of corporate bureaucracy sound like a favor that you are doing to the consumer.
It is time for Bad at Husbanding.
All right, Ben. So I didn't put these notes in, so I'm assuming you were bad at husbanding this week.
Yeah, I'm just putting it under the banner of bad at husbanding because this is something I have to... Yes, I'm always bad at husbanding. Let me tell you why, Josh. Author John Green, fiction author and also sometime nonfiction author, famous for his book The Fault in Our Stars, written a lot of other things, but that one used a term on his podcast that I listened to that I'd never heard before and I actually loved. He said, well, that was an H of G. And he kind of moved on. So I went and looked it up to find out what an H of G meant. And I found a video by him on YouTube, link in the show notes. An H of G was a shorthand he used for what he called an hermeneutics of generosity. And I see why he called it an H of G.
Yeah, a lot of
so I knew what the word generosity meant, but I did not know the word hermeneutics. So I looked it up, and the word hermeneutics means an interpretation, more generally used in like a religious context, like an interpretation of the Bible, but not necessarily just of religious texts. So an interpretation of generosity. And the context he used it in was in talking about interpreting someone else's actions. For instance, if you see someone speeding through traffic in a black Mustang, for instance, maybe they're a jerk, or maybe they're 2-year-olds in the backseat digesting a pin.
If you see some little old lady stuck in the middle of a 4-way stop intersection, completely lost and doesn't know what she's doing, well, maybe she's just confused and needs help, and not intentionally making my day terrible.
Yes. So the idea of a hermeneutics of generosity, an interpretation of grace, is that everybody out there, for the most part, is just trying to do the right thing. They're just trying to get by. They're not out to like exploit people and do terrible things. They're just trying to get to work. They're trying to make it to their kid's soccer game. They're trying to get groceries to feed their family. They're trying to make their way in the world. And we interpret our own actions with an hermeneutics of generosity, so we can extend that to other people.
I'm sighing heavily because I completely understand what you're talking about. Like, this is the way that you approach the world, the way that the filter that you use to tell the stories to yourself about the other people that are around you, to just how you interact with the universe. And I don't know why, but my brain always goes to this prisoner's dilemma thing. Like, yeah, 99% of the world out there is just trying to do their best, just like I am. And I know that, like, consciously, like in my brain, but I don't know. I don't know what happened in my past where I got burned once or twice hard enough that it's just a better expected value for me to approach the universe as if the universe is out to get me, because that keeps my guard up. That makes me make decisions as if the worst case scenario is going to happen, and so I'm always prepared for it. And I've said it before, like if all you're expecting is bad news, then you can only ever be happily surprised. And that's the reason that I'm so pessimistic all the time. Is it? I don't know. The universe lets me down less, I think.
So let's make these 4 Punnett squares here. So let's say that you're interacting with someone and you're going to give them a hermeneutics of generosity. Like, you assume that they are trying to do the best thing, and that's true, and then positive outcome for both of you.
Part of that heavy sigh that I did is I ran through this square in my head. And so this is where we're going to disagree, is because from my perspective, not doing the hermeneutics of generosity and telling myself the pessimistic, this guy's out to get me story doesn't cost me anything. Like, being on guard, I don't think I'm losing out on any positive value. Does that make sense?
So, yes, and that's what I would like to actually contend with. I think it does cost you something.
Right, and that's the thing, is it's completely subjective, and there's no way for us to actually like come to a middle ground on that.
Yeah, but it can cost you something. Like, let's say, for instance, a road rage incident. You're driving on the road and someone does something careless or irresponsible, or maybe neither, you don't know, but you tell yourself the bad story about them.
Okay.
That influences your emotions, maybe the next thing that you do. Whereas if you tell yourself the good story, maybe that can help you remain calm, make a more rational decision, not escalate the situation.
But here's the thing, like, if there's some kind of, if I get cut off in traffic, that doesn't make me upset because I'm expecting to get cut off in traffic. I'm expecting people to sideswipe me at all times. I am always expecting the worst thing to happen. And
but
so
do
when
you get angry about it? Do you yell? Do you make hand gestures?
No, because 90% of the time when it happens, I'm like, well, yep, you see, there it is. Right there.
I don't know what to call that. That's another thing altogether. Now, in a very fundamental way, our giant human brains, one of the things that we're doing most of the time, if our brains are working properly, is thinking about other people, about what they're thinking and how that influences things. if you have, say, for instance, an autistic person, this is usually one of the things missing from their life. They're incapable of, even if they're on the low end of the autism spectrum with things like Asperger's, is they aren't able to tell themselves a story about what the other person's thinking. They can't put themselves in another person's place. Now, frequently, if we're telling ourselves a story about what the other person is doing, we could be wrong. Maybe we're just not creative enough, or we just picked a wrong place. But if you choose a generous story, you'll have a better outcome.
There's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, I have thought sometimes that my lack of empathy might be one indicator that I'm on the spectrum. I don't think I am, but maybe, I don't know. I'm really good at math and I hate people, so maybe I'm in there somewhere.
Okay.
The other thing there too is, like you're talking about, like when you're applying this to telling yourself stories of other people, you are inherently limited in the stories that you are capable of telling about that person because of your limited experience.
Yes.
I have no idea what
you're right.
I have no idea what it's like to be a single parent. Like how am I supposed to tell myself a story about some young mother that cut me off in traffic?
I got it, Josh, but aren't you just as likely to be wrong to tell yourself a negative story as you are to be wrong telling yourself a positive story?
I don't tell myself stories about people. I don't have to justify why they're doing things. I just know that everybody's going to do the worst thing for me possible. They don't need a reason.
You do tell yourself stories, Josh. I know you do because I've heard you say it, and you use the vocabulary of someone that not only has judged their behavior from your perspective, but also from theirs.
Okay. I mean, that might be anecdotal.
Like the time that you pulled up to the drive-thru and the lady told you to pull forward and you said no, and then I forget what she said next. It was something like, "Honey, you're going to mess up my time. You better pull forward." And then the very next thing you said was you described her behavior from the perspective of you told yourself a story about her motivation, about her position, about her life.
Yes.
That's the way we do this. That's the way someone who's capable of empathy lives their life. You're always telling yourself stories about the other person. Here's where I wanted to go with this and why I started out under the banner of bad at husbanding.
Oh, wow.
Most of the time when we're doing this, it's in circumstances with strangers. You know, someone in the grocery store checkout line, some employee that we're transacting with, somebody at work, somebody we're driving near in traffic, those kinds of things. But also, the rest of the time, it's someone that we know very well. Your children, your wife, your family.
Okay, like now I'm gonna tack on to the end of yours, but I'm right there with you. Please keep going.
Okay, so you got to choose those people, and they have a stake in maintaining good relations with you and a common bond and friendship and people that have toxic relationships. Sometimes this question is right at the heart of the toxicity. If I try to interpret my wife's actions within hermeneutics of generosity, as opposed to not, what is the best, game theory outcome for me? And my wife said very generously, I might add, whenever I don't do this with your father, I'm almost always wrong. Whenever I assume something you did was out of malice or spite or carelessness or anger, it usually isn't.
Right. Okay. Now, as soon as you started talking about applying this to your spouse, then like the whole other story clicked in my head. Like, you're absolutely correct. If there is one person in the world that I try to apply this kind of thinking to, it is my wife, my lovely, capable, smart, intelligent, funny, beautiful wife, Nicole. And because early on in our relationship, we would clash over the idea that just simple things like stuff that you do with anybody. You're packing for a trip or whatever. Hey, did you pack this? And they look at you like, yeah, of course. I'm not 12. Of course I packed this. Like my wife looked at me. Hey, did you pack your jacket? Like, oh, of course I'm going to grab my jacket. And then I didn't grab my jacket. But so that was a point of friction once we identified it. And I never used this verbiage with it. But what I try to use with her is that everybody else in the world, yes, I'm going to assume that they're just out to screw me over because that keeps me safe. But for her, she's the person that I'm allowed to assume is a smart, capable, intelligent person that I don't have to micromanage because she's probably thinking 12 steps farther ahead than I am.
Yes, that's right at the heart of it. You guys made a covenant where you agreed to love and to cherish and all those things.
Well, I mean, we said vows. Chose her. Covenant's a strong word.
Oh, okay. So you make covenants with real estate agents, but not with your spouse?
I don't. All right, I don't know if you're using it in the legal sense or in the spiritual sense. Like
both.
Dude, you're throwing big words at me that I'm not 100%.
Anyway, like you said, I have found, and this is the bad at husbanding part, and I'll close it up. And that is that anytime I extend my wife more interpretation of generosity, it pays off. I'm never wrong to assume that she's doing something because she's generous and kind and she cares about me and she's trying to do what she thinks is best based on the stuff that she knows. If I, on the other hand, am assuming that she's doing something selfish or lazy or cruel, I'm almost always wrong.
Man, I feel like we are a solid 50% batting average for both of us. From my perspective, anyway, I'm thinking about you. Like half of the time you say stuff, I'm like, oh, Alicia, why did you ever marry this idiot of a man? And then the other half of the time it's like this. I'm like, oh, look how sweet this guy is. Alicia, he's a keeper. But I don't know what your overall long-term average is.
I love that you chose the term batting average because if you had a 500 batting average, you would be in the freaking Hall of Fame. So I'd like to think I'm somewhere near 500.
I'm definitely not in the husbanding Hall of Fame, so I'm probably more in like the twos or the threes.
Yeah. All right, Josh, it's time for Bad at Logic, and because this is an odd episode, we are doing a bias.
Oh, and Ben has dropped his lovely yourbiases.com playing cards, which have both fallacies and biases. Sponsor the podcast.
That was terrible because I'd kept them in a specific order to keep track of which ones we've done and which one we haven't.
I see. I just remember because I listen to every episode of the podcast before we record. Ben, do you not do that? Oh. Are you just not constantly re-listening to ourselves talk about things over and over? Oh my gosh.
Josh, you know how you talk about how you're OCD sometimes? Like, I get it, but now these cards are all mixed up and upside down and backwards, and I'm going to have to fix it.
Oh, no. If only there was a place that had all of the show notes listed in a chronological order, preferably on an internet site that I could access easily. Badatmagic.live, people. It's all listed there.
All right, so what's our bias this week,
Our
Josh?
bias is perfect because we basically have been talking about it for the past 45 minutes. It's the pessimism bias. The card itself says you overestimate the likelihood of negative outcomes. Ben, I don't think that I can, if I even tried to say that I don't have this, I think exhibits A through, I don't know, we're into hexadecimal numbers at this point, would be every episode of the podcast we've ever recorded. Like, I suffer from the pessimism bias.
So the weird thing about this is the way that you express the pessimism bias in terms of the positive outcomes it has for you. Because it says here, pessimism is often a defense mechanism against disappointment. Perhaps the worst aspect of pessimism is that even if something good happens, you'll probably feel pessimistic about it anyway.
Yeah, all of those things are true. And it's a calculated risk that I am totally 100% aware of, and I'm doing it anyway.
So you went and saw a movie tonight with your kids, and you're like, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds terrible." You're like, "No, I had really low expectations, so it was fine."
Perfect. This is the perfect example of how my life view has paid off for me.
Yeah, and I can't argue with that outcome. Well done, I guess. As long as you're aware that you have it and why you're using it, then fill your boots.
See, so I'm a pessimist, but I don't get upset about it. Like when the bad things actually do happen, it's like, oh well, yeah, you see, there's the bad thing. I don't get mopey and sad about it. Like I knew it was coming. How can I be sad?
Yeah. For bad English this week, I want to introduce a new term. The term is peckish.
Ben, I use this. I use this sometimes.
So the dictionaries I looked it up in said that this is used on both sides of the pond, but particularly in the UK.
Okay.
Like, I heard this word almost daily in the UK, but yeah, we know what it means. It's to call to mind the idea of a bird, like, pecking at some food, which means that you're feeling hungry, but not starving. You wouldn't say peckish if you were starving. And sometimes it's also used to mean, like, crotchety or cranky.
Oh, yeah,
What's fatigue, dear? I am feeling a bit peckish, if I do say so.
Yeah, so I would say I'm feeling peckish if I... Like, it's that space between, oh, I could eat, and, oh, I'm hungry, when's lunch? Like, in that middle there, it's like, I'm a little peckish. I'm getting there.
All right. Well, I didn't use this one prior to my time in the UK, and I wouldn't say I use it now, but you do, so hey.
Haha.
I wanted to take a minute for Board Game Survivor this week just because Magic Gathering just released their newest set. Have you played any of it yet? It's called The Streets of New Capenna.
I am in my third draft as we speak, and I have a winning record. So I am loving New Capenna so far.
Awesome. So let's talk about, so with every set, there's usually some type of mystical theme. In this case, it's like a golden era Art Deco gangster world.
Killing me, Smalls. Yes. All the box art you just described, like what the pictures are. New Capenna is a city that was built by literal angels, but then taken over by crime families that then got rid of like 99% of the angels that lived in the city and actually distilled their essence. One, either captured into the statues that are around the city, which is referenced multiple times in the cards, or distilled into an alcoholic beverage that is featured in much of the card art and all the treasure tokens. Like they've distilled the essence of the angels into magical energy and power. And that's what these crime families are competing for.
Okay, I love that you just illustrated in your criticism of my explanation of the flavor of the set in that mine was only surface deep, as in my observations of the box art, and yours was very deep. What is the source of that additional knowledge? How did you get that?
I went digging for it. Like every set, they have like the articles that they talk about the flavor and where they like the story team came up.
You
with
went and read those on purpose because you wanted to consume them.
Yeah. Yes.
I avoided them deliberately because I wanted to not consume them. I would like to think that sets like this are designed to please people like you and people like me. I'm like, hey, this is cool. I like this Art Deco gangster world. I was satisfied at that level of comprehension.
Yeah, you're one of those guys that ignores all the art and the flavor text, and it drives me nuts. But yeah,
I read the flavor text.
I don't know, man.
So from a bottom-up perspective, there are 5 main crime families in this world that utilize 3 of the 5 colors of magic for deriving their identity. And they've done some unique things, and I think very similar to what they've done in the Harry Potter-themed world, which is they took traditional color combinations but then did something slightly different than what you expected. Because they've done a set with these 5 3-color combinations before, but this set took those same 3-color combinations and drew out a different identity than the previous usage.
Which is easy to do. Like, for people that aren't familiar with Magic, there is like a story flavor that they attach to the different colors. Like, white is supposed to be law and order, blue is supposed to be intellect and magic, and then black is supposed to be selfishness and like death. And when you combine those 3, white, blue, and black, originally back in the Shards of Alara, that was Esper, and they went very like science-heavy, artifact-focused, like very like selfish but research-based kind of thing. Think about like university professors that are all struggling to get grants for themselves. Like there's selfishness in there, but it's all working towards like a greater future, supposedly. That's kind of where they went with that one. In this one, the crime family that is those same colors, the white, blue, and black, is the Obscura family. And they're more like shady fences. They're like the back channel people that you go to. Like they have strict rules, but they're also they're a crime family. So like
Josh.
Yeah, what?
That was brilliant. I was brilliant. Did you take that directly out of an article?
No, I just pulled that from my memories of the Shards of Alara block from the story that I read then.
That was, I couldn't have said it better myself. So now imagine that same thing that you said about those identities of those colors combined, what they meant before and what they mean now, and how, yeah, it's all true to the colors, but it is very different in this iteration of it.
Yeah, so that applies to the whole set.
Okay, so I did the pre-release a week ago where I went and, you had to pick. The fun thing about the pre-release was you show up at the event and you have to pick one of the 5 crime families. And then they give you a box that has some random cards, but also some that are very specific to that family so that your end deck will probably be related to them. So it felt like being a new guy in town and having to align yourself with one of the 5 crime families.
I'm actually really jealous and sad that I didn't go to a pre-release now.
Yeah, it was great. A good time. And I made a great deck and had fun playing it.
You played this stupid Jund deck, didn't you? The green, red, black?
No, I didn't. I can't even remember the name of the family. I forget all the proper nouns. I had a good time. Today, there was a draft at my store where they had a draft where you basically get to pick from a group of random cards and put together a deck as opposed to pre-selecting your colors before you start. So in this case, I ended up in green, black, red. I forget the name of that crime family too. And my deck was
Riveters.
Was incredible. Like it was Super good. One of the best draft decks I probably ever had. So I was, there was a lot of prizes up for grabs, and I went into the second to last round, and I was playing against a former professional Magic player. I've seen videos of him on the Pro Tour playing against other professional Magic players. So I was a little bit nervous, but I've also beat this guy before. I know I can beat him, and I know my deck's really stinking good. So we're starting the first match, and I play, there's a lot in this set about sequencing your lands because a lot of them come into play tapped.
Yeah.
And so I was sequencing my lands, and I played one of the ones that are specific to the families. There's this interesting cycle of lands where you play it, you gain a life, and then you go search for a basic of one of the 3 colors of your crime family.
Yes.
But when you draft, you might get some that only overlap partially with your main colors,
right.
And it's still okay to play them.
Absolutely.
So I had a couple of those in my deck, and I had one that I thought was the true color identities of my family, but it was actually one of the ones that only overlapped with 2. And I played it, and I searched for a land that wasn't on it. Here's the thing. I put it into play. I passed the turn. My opponent plays his turn. It came back to me, and I drew the top card of my library, and the top card of my library was the land I thought I had played. So I looked at it, and then I looked down at my graveyard. So then I'm looking at it, and I'm having this moment where I have to decide what to do. Now, before I tell you what I did, Josh, I want you to know that I'd basically gotten away with doing something illegal.
Not the first time that you've done that. Like, I will never forget when we were at Grand Prix Vegas and you played a Changeling when you had the Bear Lord in play, and I had to call you on it, and I was so mad at you at the time.
Yeah, no, but that what you're talking about is just me missing a trigger. This is where I'd done something that the game does not permit that was in my favor.
Yeah, that you had done the textbook definition of cheating without intent.
Right. Yes. I cheated without intent, but then I had this moment where I realized that I'd done it, and my opponent hadn't caught me. All right, so we'll pause there. What would you do in this situation?
I would come clean with my opponent and be like, oh, crap, I just realized that I treated this land like it was this land. I have this land. I will play it this turn, and I will only get color. Like, I will only get a color restricted to, like, the 2 that overlap.
Okay, I forgot to give you a detail that you needed to know. Because of the high level of prizes at this tournament, they were playing the tournament at Comp REL, and there were judges there.
This guy would have immediately called you out and got you kicked, like game loss.
Okay, but I hadn't told him yet. I picked up the card and realized my mistake.
So never play that land? Just hold it in your hand the rest of the entire game and hope that he doesn't notice?
All right, so I'll tell you what I did.
You came clean and you got a game loss.
I did. I called the judge and I got a game loss. You're right. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. I just called the judge because I knew I'd done something illegal and I couldn't think of a way to fix it. So he comes over.
I would have discussed it with my opponent before I called the judge, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So the judge comes over. He looks at it. My opponent knew as soon as I called the judge. He knew what was going to happen. He's a pro. He knew. I didn't, but he knew. He knew what was going to happen. So the judge comes over, kind of looks at the situation, puts her hands on their hip, blows, and you're like, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give you a game loss. I was like, oh. So he wrote on my slip, gave me a game loss. We started the second game, and my deck was crazy good, but he played 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 5-drop, 6-drop, and just rolled me. You know, just utterly curved out. I had no answer, and he blew me out, and I lost. Then I won the final round. And so I came out in the point standings in second place to him. So I got second place and I won a bunch of prizes and I was second to him. I feel like in that moment, if I just read my cards, the problem is the game's so complicated sometimes you just give yourself permission to do some mental shortcuts.
That sounds like an excuse. Like here's the thing. The cards that you're talking about are all named differently. And guess what? The names of the crime family correspond to the lands that you can get, buddy. So maybe if you paid a little more attention to the proper nouns, you wouldn't have made that mistake.
I have no defense to what you just said.
Also, the fact that it's written on the card, the lands
Josh,
that you're allowed to get.
There are 80 words on that card.
Yes, and 3 of them are the ones that matter, and they're right in the middle, and they're all capitalized. Like, they're not hard to find, man.
Yes. Yeah. I wasn't trying to make an excuse in the respect that I think I shouldn't have gotten a game loss. I cheated. I was trying to make an excuse that when you play this game, as complicated as it can be, as dense as it can be, as much lore as there can be, as much stuff as there is to remember, you have to take shortcuts somewhere or your brain is going to explode, and it cost me. It cost me a game, and it cost me winning the tournament.
Not the first time something like this has like exceeded your brain space, supposedly, and cost you problems like this. Now, I'm not going to criticize you on that. You did the right thing. Yay for you. But here's my recommendation. The next time you rear-end somebody, see if you can talk to the other driver and work something out between the two of you before you call the cops.
I love it. That was great. In fact, what a great place to transition to our feature today. And Josh, first of all, before we introduce it, I want to ask you what made you think of doing this feature? What made you decide to do this?
So I recommended this topic to Ben via text message a few weeks ago, and it was probably one of my shower thoughts where I was just I was thinking about my age, buddy. Like I feel like now, like this is the last couple of calendar years is when I've really started to actually physically feel kind of old. Like I'm starting to feel the miles on the truck. And I don't know, I just got to thinking of, you know what? Like if I'm going to live for another X number of years, what are some of the things that I would want to see? Like what are the things that when I was a kid I expected would happen? And now that I'm a little older and wiser, what are the things that I still want to like experience before I go?
I love it. Okay, I want to name this segment. I didn't ask your permission to do this. You can reject it if you want, in case we ever decide to do it again. Back in the late 90s, Conan O'Brien was starting to raise to popularity as a late-night talk show host, and he used to do this bit. They had 100 bits on that show, but this was one of their bits, where him and Andy and the other announcer, they'd turn down the lights in the studio, they'd put on a funny hat, shine a flashlight under their chin, and someone would sing, "In the year 2000." Do you remember this sketch?
I think I
Link
saw
in the
it once
show
or
notes.
twice, yeah.
Anyway, then they would say something silly that was going to happen in the future, and the audience would laugh, and they would all take turns. And every time, "In the year 2000," and they would sing this. The funniest thing that I love is the Conan O'Brien show was still going strong and doing the sketches well past the year 2000. And after the year 2000 actually came and went, the first time they decided they wanted to do this sketch again, they didn't change the number.
Oh, you can't. You can't change the number.
So they were into the mid 2000s, and they were still singing this same song. So that's what I want to call this bit, "In the year 2000."
Okay, sure. Let's go for it. In the year 2000.
So you and I kind of negotiated over how we wanted to talk about what we thought the future should be like, and we both agreed that if we're going to have this discussion, we need to give it some tiers. So I wanted to separate the tiers kind of by like phases of life. So right now, in the next 5 to 10 years, we're still in the tier where we like got kids living in our house.
Okay.
And then after that, there's like the next group after that where they're like in college and maybe getting married and we're becoming grandparents. And that's like that's the short tier, and then the mid tier, and then the long tier is like the last things we see before we die, maybe 50 years from now.
Yeah, I thought this was very interesting because like just the fact that you are categorizing the time that you have left on this earth in relation to where your kids are is very telling to you as a person, because like I'm just thinking about this as short, middle, and long. Like my kids don't, like, I don't know, they don't factor into my planning for the future, I guess, as strongly as you. But you have more kids, and my kids are younger, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I also think that, while as an entire species of humanity, we're perpetuating ourselves going forward, and maybe you just kind of like, well, if I don't reproduce, someone else will, and humanity will go forward. I just need to worry about my life. But I do kind of think of it in terms of like, what's my piece of humanity that's going to go forward?
Ugh. My kids are their own people. Like I'm not trying to make my mark on the future through my kids. If I'm going to make my mark...
Why not?
Oh, because if I'm going to make my mark, it's going to be like my initials carved into the moon with a space laser or something like diabolical.
But your kids are part of that. They're most definitely part of that. Think of how much time you dedicate to them. You sent me the most adorable picture I've ever seen today of your daughter standing on your back so that she can have some graffiti angel wings that were on the wall over her shoulders.
But that wasn't for me. That was for her.
But that was symbolic of exactly what I'm talking about. This is a middle-aged man holding up a young girl that's going to become a woman to teach her about life and the future and hold her up. It was beautiful.
The difference is I'm not trying to stake a claim on her, on what she does as a person. Like, I'm just doing my best for her because that's my role. I'm not taking any claim to then her whatever she does in the world.
I don't think of it as taking a claim on what my children do, but I do feel accountable for
Said the
outcome.
the guy who did exactly that when his son got, like, what was it, first or second place at the big tournament. On this podcast, you were trying to take full responsibility for your son winning that tournament.
Well done, Josh. All right, so what are some of the things that you've got that you want the world to look like in the next 5 to 10 years?
So I'm gonna start. Let's start light. Let's start easy. Something that's fun. In like the short to midterm, God, I want it to be short, but I want augmented reality to be like a thing. So there was an old role-playing game that I loved playing. It was called Shadowrun, and it was a cyberpunk role-playing game. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's set in the future, and the story and the lore just like grabbed me and like sucked me in, and I love it. And one of the things that's just ubiquitous in this world is the idea that the internet isn't a thing that you access. It's a thing that exists simultaneously in real space with you. Like you're walking, you have either contact lenses or implants in your eyes or just normal like eyeglasses, and you're walking around town, and like a noodle shop's website will be like displayed in holographic form or whatever, augmented over reality in your vision automatically. And you just look at it and then like use thought processes or whatever to like click through links and menus and pages and stuff. I would look at you on the screen we're looking at now, and then my augmented reality would know that I'm looking at Ben Rich with this contact information. And if I needed to Zelle you some money, or if I needed to send you some files or whatever, like I would be able to do all that seamlessly because the reality is literally being augmented by all of this data and information.
We're so close.
I know, that's the
I
thing.
think this is such a realistic goal for the next 5 to 10 years. We're so close.
Yes.
I already do this way. Like, for instance, I used to do, okay, if I used to want to find like a place to find something to eat, I might have opened up the yellow pages and looked through the yellow pages. Or I might have had like a map book. And now, you know, you could search on the internet and it would give you a text list. But now I do it in a way that's almost augmented reality. I'll bring up my Maps application, look up my drive home, and have it pop out restaurants along the way, and I'll pick them based on the proximity to my commute. So it's really close.
Yes, I think the piece that I'm looking for is the way is I want to be able to interact with a person's digital profile while I'm talking to them physically. Like if I'm talking to you right now, I want to be able to seamlessly have all these tools integrated where I can then, like I said, like transfer you files or send you money or like exchange contact information or something.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I hope we see that in the next 5 to 10 years. Mine's a little bit different. I had one that's kind of like bioengineering, and I have heard that we are right on the verge of creating viable synthetic meat.
That's a good one. That is a really good one. My family and I, we've actually cut back, like during COVID, because my kids were interested, and we watched a lot of YouTube videos like you do about climate change and things, and because of those, as a family, we kind of cut back on our beef and pork intake, and we're doing a lot more chicken and fish because it's a lot better for the environment in the long run. It's just one more drop in that ocean of the tiny things that we actually can do. But genetically engineered meat, I would get my steak back, Ben. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Like if I could eat something that still tastes like it came from a living thing, but nothing actually had to suffer and die in order for that, and I can consume protein and eat something delicious, I'm all for it.
Yeah, meat is undeniably delicious. And any vegetarian that says, oh, it's not fair to the cows, oh, be quiet. Cows would not be alive today. They are too dumb if we didn't breed them for their meat. They're delicious, delicious meat.
All right, what's second on your short-term list?
Well, all right, so the next on my short-term list, I have a couple of things that span all three categories of time, okay?
I did a few like that too. Like, what do I want this thing to look like in 5 years? What do I want it to look like in 20? What do I want it to look like in 50?
Right. And so one of these things that I have in here is genetic engineering, and that spans all of the time. But the short-term thing that I would really like to see is some actual diseases getting either treated or cured because we have such better genetic engineering today than we did when we were kids. Like, if you've never heard of CRISPR, go look up CRISPR and watch some YouTube videos on that. The price, like the economic dollar cost to do genetic research and experimentation has been decreased by like 100-fold in the last 5 years. And so it's really exciting to live in a time where we have access to technology like that, where we could really start making impactful changes two diseases that affect so many people.
I love it. But you didn't have a specific one in mind?
Not a specific disease, no, because I'm not well versed enough to start talking like that.
Okay, so I want to give a caveat here. First world problems. We're with people somewhere in the world right now starving, living in poverty, working in inhumane conditions, suffering from preventable diseases, without access to sanitary drinking water, and or suffering from racism or war or political oppression. We're just like white guys living in peace in relative prosperity. I get all that.
You make me feel really bad for my first one being augmented reality. You know that, right?
But I'm trying to acknowledge that, but saying it's still okay for us to talk about it. So give me a minute. I understand how tone deaf it is for a couple of rich white guys to whine about these kinds of problems.
Oh, why don't I have VR yet?
Yeah, exactly. However, we all just live our human experience where we're at. So I'm going to talk about something from where I'm at. So in this realm of bioengineering, one area that's kind of the same way as if you see a mom whose child dies because of a drunk driver, then she dedicates her life to creating a foundation about that. It's not the only problem in the world, but it's the one she dedicated her time to.
Right.
When I was 7 years old, my youngest sister was born with a disease called cystic fibrosis. It's a very simple genetic mutation in the human genome that causes a whole host of problems and ultimately threatens her life in a very real way. Luckily, over the course of her life, the treatments of the symptoms and that are available medically have kind of kept pace with her health and prevented her from dying prematurely, but she's been very close a couple of times. So I would love to see the advances in genetic engineering bring an end to people suffering from cystic fibrosis, CF sometimes called.
Nice. Very good.
Okay. So what else you got?
Oh, my turn still. Okay. Well, all right, let's go. I don't have very many short-term ones. Okay, let's go with this one. Biometrics. I want biometrics to be way more implemented like across all sectors of our society.
I love it too.
Why?
Don't make me sign pieces of paper when I do a credit card transaction.
Oh, we need a photo ID. Why? My photo doesn't look anything like me. Like my license in Arizona, I got it when I moved 3 or 4 years ago, and it doesn't expire until 2063. Like I'm not going to look.
You're preaching to the choir here.
I'm not going to look anything like myself in 2063. Yeah. So
no, it's such a legacy relic of the past. Like, do you have a stone tablet that some agent of the government has etched your name upon? Yeah, I do.
Right. Social Security cards.
When I leave the house now, I never forget my phone, but I sometimes forget my wallet because I can use contactless payment.
Yeah. No.
And it can validate. It's a supercomputer that I carry in my pocket that can validate my identity to people that care.
Well, and we have public key interface, PKI. Like, people look up PKI if you're a nerd. It's chef's kiss. Lovely. I love it from a computer science standpoint. Why, Ben, don't I have an RFID chip in the back of my hand that has a PKI private key assigned to me from the government that verify my identity to anyone on the planet, completely and 100% cryptographically secure?
I will not argue that point with you. I know some arguments that are against it, but I won't present them.
Yeah, the religious Mark of the Beast stuff. Yeah. You listen, Mark of the Beast be damned. I will be the first person in line to get my RFID chip into my hand. I don't care if it does have 666X etched on it.
You remind me of a documentary I saw once about a guy who went on the internet offering to sell his soul to anyone that would buy it because he didn't believe that such a thing existed, and he was willing to accept any amount of money anyone would offer for it.
Yes, because yes, from a perspective like mine, I'm giving up nothing and receiving economic benefit. Hooray!
Yes. You'd be surprised how weird that makes people get. Anyway, I think one of my next is, just about kind of the strife we live under in geopolitics. It feels like we're so close to taking the next step towards the Star Trek utopia, where we just respect people and we live in peace and harmony and we recognize the common good and we make common decisions. I'd love to see an end to the war in Ukraine and beginning to nuclear disarmament.
So this is funny. I have 3 of the things that I listed on my list. I wrote it down, and then afterwards I categorized it as never in the mid or short, mid, or long term, I put never. And
what? You have a category called never?
And that's what I realized after I wrote it. Like, this is something I would like to see before I die. It's never going to happen. And kind of along the same lines is this transition away from nationalism and tribalism and into like speciesism. Like, hey, we're all people. Let's all come together. And that's just never going to happen.
Okay. So when I was a kid, probably a milestone. It doesn't feel like a milestone anymore, but it was a time. It was like the year 1996, I think. I may be wrong. The movie Independence Day came out.
Yes.
Do you remember that movie?
Great movie. Yes, I remember.
Yeah, fantastic movie. It came out on the 4th of July, and there was a great deal of like nationalism in it, but it was almost overcome by the humanism of it. That, hey, we've got all these nations on Earth, but when we're attacked by these overpowering alien species, we can unite together as humanity and not go quietly into the night, but stand up. So that,
Yeah.
And I felt, I think anyone that watched that movie kind of felt the stir of our common humanity over any kind of nationalistic tribalism.
But see, this is part of the Star Trek problem. This is why, like, the Federation doesn't interact with a species until they have warp drive, because the
Prime Directive.
The Prime Directive, the existence of an alien species would radically alter the development of us. Like you're talking about with the Independence Day aliens showing up and like, oh well, we're abandoning tribalism and nationalism for the time being because there's a larger threat. Like, yeah, I feel like,
and it doesn't last, does it? I mean, look at how unified it felt in the country on September 12th, 2001. How long did that last?
A while, but I mean, it still faded over time. But that's the thing is we as a species need to get over this without an external threat facing us.
Okay, so we're just giving these things that we're aspiring to. We're not necessarily providing the solutions to them, and I don't think we need to take that on. Okay. But I would like to see an end to that kind of thing.
I would too, but again, I think it's never going to happen.
All right, what else you got?
Okay, the last thing I have for short term is autonomous vehicles. I want self-driving cars to be like, I put available for this one. And what I mean by that is there's not just one car that can drive itself. Like, this needs to be a feature. Yeah, you're going to pay extra for it right now, but this needs to be something that we have in our life.
Agreed.
I
think this is inevitable.
It is inevitable, but there's going to be so many people that kick and scream about this for so long. I will die on this hill, Ben, is a pretty good AI will be better than the best human driver in most circumstances.
I agree.
I
agree. I'm not going to argue with you about this. I will say that I think these kinds of things come along all the time in humanity, where somebody, like, for instance, I've read some really good books about like how people said that we were never going to replace the horse or with cars, or we were never going to replace candles with electricity. And there were the stick in the muds and the people resisting it, but eventually it came along, and all the time it took for us to make the transition was just a loss.
Well,
there are humans that are going to die between now and when self-driving cars are ubiquitous that are just senseless lost lives that shouldn't have happened.
This is one of those things that I have multiple listings with different milestones across different time periods, because my next one for autonomous driving in the midterm is human driving is not just reduced but eliminated. Like, it becomes illegal for people to be driving cars because all the cars are robots and they're so much better driving than we are, than we could ever be.
So we don't use horses for transportation anymore, but people still own like farms they can go to and ride them because they enjoy it. Would you? I mean, you wouldn't object to there being like a track you can go race old-fashioned cars on, would you?
Absolutely not. But if every car on the road is an autonomous vehicle to the point where we're now removing like stoplights and intersections are just controlled by the cloud, now that's the point where, okay, you have your gas-powered car that you drive with your hands. It's like a baby's toy. Well, that's cute, but you're not allowed to drive it on our roads with the real cars anymore.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. Okay, I want to add one in media. In the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to see the Bad at Magic podcast reach 50,000 listeners, and me have a #1 bestseller on the New York Times nonfiction list.
If you like what we do, share us with a friend. Oh, wait a minute. We're not doing that yet. Now, you being on the New York Times bestseller, that's an interesting short-term goal. I'm guessing, are you writing something at the moment? Do you have things in the works? Are you Brandon Sandersoning me right now? Are you going to slam down like 3 completed like novel transcripts?
I wish, Josh. I have started writing the Italian Job. Listeners, if you're new to the podcast, go back and listen to episode 9. I have a story to tell. In book form, I could definitely flesh it out a lot more.
We really found our voice in episode 9, The Italian Job.
Okay, I want to take a time out and talk about something that you and I did together that I don't think we've talked about on the podcast.
Okay.
When I was deployed to Florida, through a series of coincidences, I forget how they're connected, I read a book by a Harvard professor by the name of Steven Pinker. The book is called Enlightenment Now. And I was kind of taken back by this book, and it really changed my thinking about the world. And so I recommended it to you, and I believe you read it as well.
I did. On your recommendation, I did read this book.
Okay, so the thing that this book transformed about my thinking was we fall into this easy cognitive trap of believing that when someone kind of throws out this hearsay that the world is a terrible place, we just believe them.
Well, and as we've confirmed in this podcast multiple times, I am more apt to believe that than you are.
Yeah, so, it could be something like racism or sexism or, poor working conditions, bad health care, all those kinds of things. And someone says, we need to make America great again. And people just call into mind this vague idea of some idealistic time in the past when things are better than they are now, and they rally to the cause.
But the truth of the matter is, and this book is pointing out, that things are actually better now than they have ever been, almost across the board.
Almost in every way possible, things are better now than they've ever been.
Yes. And which, again, like, it is a good book to read, and he presents a lot of hard evidence, which I really enjoy, and actual
lots of data and facts and statistics and studies. Yes.
Which I do appreciate. At the same time, I am very hesitant to fall into the opposite cognitive trap where, things are just continuing to get better, so there's nothing that I need to do. Okay,
yes, and he says that, he acknowledges that in the book. He's like, just because I'm saying that this is this is the least racist time there's ever been in the history of ever, doesn't mean that we don't have more to do.
Yes, the improvements that we have made in the past does not negate the need for further improvements.
Okay, well then let us transition into the mid period in our what we think the future should look like.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to hit up the one that I did earlier with genetic engineering. In my midterm for genetic engineering, I want it to get to the point where not only have we started to cure genetic diseases, but now we have the ability, the capability, and the opportunity to do cosmetic genetic engineering. This is the tailor-made baby stuff from Gattaca and things like that. Or it's like, how tall do you want your son to be? Or, hey, like, you're a little heavy. Let's go ahead and switch off the gene that actually stores fat in your body for a minute.
Wow. I don't even know what to say about that. Like, I get that that's an aspiration of science, but I feel like the ethical conundrums presented by that area, if we can actually do those things you just said, exceed anything else. Artificial intelligence, devastating weapons, like...
I know what you're saying, and the most interesting point that I've ever heard brought up about this topic specifically is, even if you, Ben Rich, if you disagree with this whole thing entirely and you don't have it done for anywhere in your family or any of your descendants have it done because they disagree with it inherently, if one of my kids decides to have one of their kids genetically modified in the womb and the kid comes out with genetically engineered like traits or whatever, those are part of its DNA, that grandchild of mine, right? Which now means that those man-made or structured or engineered or tailored genetics are part of the human gene pool forever. For as long as that person propagates, those genes that were switched artificially will continue to go down the line.
Okay, I want to give 2 examples here of why I think... Okay, we've come so far from not even understanding genetics to understanding them, to mapping them, to actually being able to impact them. I mean, that transformation alone is humongous. But let me give you an example. Cystic fibrosis occurs when 2 parents that are carriers of a recessive gene have a child and they inherit both recessive alleles, and then they exhibit the symptoms that cause them to not be able to digest their food and have extremely sticky mucus in their lungs that makes them susceptible to respiratory infections and ultimately could cause them to die of respiratory failure. However, if you have only the recessive gene and a dominant gene, you display none of the symptoms seemingly, but you also have another symptom that you can't generally observe in a population. Intel. This is why it even still exists. Back in pioneer days, when you had a wagon train crossing the plains and there would be an outbreak of dysentery, do you know which people in that wagon train would be least likely to die of dysentery?
The people with the recessive trait for cystic fibrosis?
Yes.
Just the way you phrase that. You really T-balled that up for me. I appreciate it.
The carriers only. So there's things about the human genome that we don't understand. Another good example is bananas. We've engineered bananas to be the perfect genetic specimen of exactly what we want a banana to be, but then when some disease comes along that they're susceptible to, it wipes out the entire existence of bananas. We could do that to humanity.
I would love to let you spend another 10 minutes building the sandcastle because I'm going to kick it over so hard.
All right.
Here's the thing, Ben. Everything you're talking about, yes, I completely agree. But guess what? These are problems that are way, way better solved by an artificial intelligence or a sentient or a being than we are. Just because we can't understand it doesn't mean there's not something that can.
Okay, so let me give my midterm medical things I think we should do with genetic science. I went and I pulled up the list of worldwide causes of death. And by a large margin, it's 3 things.
Heart disease, people eating too much.
Cancer,
yep.
Heart disease, cancer, and respiratory diseases. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, things like that.
Well, interesting. Cancer is just the constant dice that you're rolling because your cells are replicating at such a rate constantly all day. If there is a specific kind of mistake that is made in those replications, you now have cancer. And so the longer that you live, the more times you roll the dice and the higher the likelihood is that you are going to get cancer at some point.
No, you're right. These are things that aren't necessarily more prevalent other than when we eliminate all the other things, this comes out.
Right, exactly. All the things that were killing people in the 1800s because they didn't have sanitary water, then we get rid of that and all of a sudden it's all the little stuff now.
I was surprised how little humans have to do with other humans dying. You got to go way down the list into 18th or 19th place before you get to things like car accidents, suicide, terrorism, war, those kinds of things. Those are 0.01% of deaths.
Is suicide humans killing humans, or is it just? Never mind. That's a philosophical dimension.
All right. So I think those things are well within the midterm level of science to at least start dealing with, to help deal with cardiovascular disease, excessive weight gain, diabetes, Alzheimer's, HIV, AIDS, all those kinds of things.
Well, let's just bring the health train home, buddy, because my long-term goal for genetic engineering and health is human immortality. This,
I'm putting that in the never box, but yeah.
Here's the difference between us. From my perspective, my physical body is just the meat machine that's carrying around my consciousness. And like any other machine, there's no reason that I can't, there's no way that I can't know the machinery of it so well that I can keep it in perfect tuned order for forever, as long as I have access to new parts. So what's stopping genetic engineering, once we understand the aging process a little bit better, to just keep refreshing the meat machine and just press?
Josh, we have reversed the roles. I am now the pessimist and you are the optimist.
Because you are factoring in this other thing that is a mortal soul, or an immortal soul that is not meant to be in a mortal vessel forever, blah, 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 whatever. I don't care. I don't care about the specifics. You think that there is a separate thing that's going on there that has to be disentangled from the mortal shell of it. Me, baby, this meat machine's all I got, buddy. I'm going to keep this in prime working order for as long as possible, despite the sugary drink that I'm consuming right now.
Okay, so let me see. What's next on my... Let's get into the tech area on my mid-list. Right. I feel like we are on the verge. So since the mid-70s, there was a man by the name of Moore. I can't remember his first name. Moore. He worked for Intel back in the 1970s, and he was like, hey, we figured out this cool thing we can do where we can take a piece of silicon, and it's a semiconductor, and we can pack a bunch of transistors onto it. But it seems like about every 18 months, we're able to get about twice as many on as we have before. And since that time, we've still been able to keep doing that over and over and over again. Every 18 months, we're able to double the amount of semiconductor transistors we can pack onto a piece of silicon. And yet, we're approaching the theoretical scientific limit.
Yes, we're at the point where quantum tunneling becomes a problem with our switches.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about. However, we're on the verge now of using atoms and matter in a completely different way to do something called quantum computing.
That's going to destroy. That's going to both save the human race and destroy everything that we've built up to this point. And it's going to be a terrible and awesome transition.
And I think it could be 20 to 30 years away.
Yeah, we need to be both excited and terrified of the quantum computing thing to happen.
When we have access to that degree of storage and processing power, I think then all of our computing dreams can come true. Full artificial intelligence, ubiquitous everywhere computing, access to all of human knowledge at all times. Well, our biggest dilemma will be just deciding what not to do.
Okay. My mid to long-term goal for technology is all of my favorite animes involve people putting a little headset on and then their nervous system being interrupted at the transistor level. And they are completely, from their perspective, physically transported to a virtual world to play an MMO that is amazing and awesome.
Okay, kind of like the holodeck. You just get to inhabit another world.
Yes.
Maybe even be a different person.
Yes, entirely. Like if you saw the movie Surrogates with Bruce Willis, where he puts on a little helmet and his body goes to sleep, but his robot gets to walk around. Think of that, but instead of him walking on a robot, he's in the World of Warcraft, or he's in some.
It could be anything,
just any virtual world, and that would revolutionize so much. Like teleworking would be great because you would quote unquote almost physically be there, and you wouldn't have to pay for any real estate. You'd have the coolest office ever, and you wouldn't have to pay for it. And then, too, the gaming opportunities, Ben. Holy crap, the gaming opportunities.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is a podcast about games, life, and other things.
That's what I want, man. Like, just like if I turn into some, like get in a car wreck and I'm a paraplegic, man, just plug me into World of Warcraft and leave me there.
But will that just make us all effectively paraplegic?
We're talking about Ready Player One stuff. And yes, it will.
Yeah, okay. We've talked about that before. I'd like to come out of left field with one we haven't introduced before, and that is that I think we're on the verge as humanity of understanding the way that our climate works to the point where we can actually start to interface with it in a way previously unknown. You know, we already do things like cloud seeding and stuff like this, but I'm talking on the level of like preventing hurricanes or, you know,
we put
deciding where it's going to rain.
We have a weather dominator, and we use it only for good. We have the right. thermostat on the planet, and we just tweak it so it's ideal. Yeah. I'm with you. I can get behind that. If you're one of those people that loves like giant hurricane storms and tsunamis, sorry, the future's not for you.
I loved that. Okay, and along these lines, I think we need to make a transition to a majority in the midterm, at least, a majority of renewable energy sources.
That's on my list too. Yeah, for the midterm,
nuclear, solar, water, geothermal, whatever it is,
fusion.
Just renewable energy.
Fusion,
sources.
baby.
Fusion.
That's where it's got to be. Seawater.
Is that in your midterm, 20 to 30 years? You think we're going to be doing fusion?
Just this past quarter, I can't remember if it was last month or the month before, but this quarter, there was some lab that was conducting fusion experiments where, for the first time ever, they generated more energy than they used to produce the reaction.
Yeah. Whenever I see those headlines, I always get excited about it and pull up the story, and it's like, for 1/1000th of a second, we produce.
Yes, exactly. And it was for like some fraction of a second or whatever, but it doesn't matter. It's still a step in the right direction, man.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Well, we're talking about cold fusion, you jerk. Like, read a science book. We're not talking about making a sun.
But the word cold is a misnomer there, but yes.
A reaction, a fusion reaction that cannot sustain itself. Like,
I get it. I mean, that's one of the core magical hidden technologies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the arc reactor. That we've got characters and objects all over the place that just have unbounded access to energy.
Yeah, we could make an Iron Man suit right now if we didn't have to haul around a 500-volt cable behind it.
Right. Okay.
All right, so
what else you got in the midterm?
Okay, so I've got 3. 2 of them are mid, 1 of them is long. I'm going to throw them all at the same time. This is the order that I want space exploration to happen. You ready?
Yeah.
1, we need to get off this planet. So we need a moon base. Like we need something that's going to get us out into the larger
Just
solar
be a
system.
baby step.
Yeah, baby step. Because getting stuff off of this planet is very hard. Getting stuff off the moon is a lot easier. So if we're going to have any kind of deep space or extra planetary, like anything productive happening, it's going to happen from the moon, not from Earth. Second is we need a much better way of getting into space, which has got to be a space elevator in my mind. We don't have the only thing holding us back.
That's the kind of thing that science fiction writers and physics theorists like to pontificate about, but I've never seen any kind of practical proposal for how that would actually work.
There are lots of practical proposals. The impractical part right now is the material science. Like there are.
It's always carbon nanotubes, but I don't think I still haven't seen how to get from here to there.
Carbon nanotubes have all of the structural processes and characteristics that we need to create a working space elevator. The only problem is the manufacturing, because they are literally nanotubes. Creating nanotubes on a large scale is impractically expensive because of that. That doesn't mean it won't be fixed with technology. It will. We'll have space elevators. That's the way to get to space.
Wow. Okay.
The last one, this is the long term, is asteroid mining. We're gonna like there's asteroids. There's so many asteroids. There are so many asteroids.
Yeah, just like we talk about with economics, that there are things where eventually the cost benefit ratio is going to tip in favor of this. Like the value of the metals in an asteroid will just be so much that we can't afford not.
Here's
to.
the thing: it'll be somebody like Jeff Bezos being like, you know what? It's going to cost $800 billion to grab an asteroid and haul it into Earth's orbit. But it's going to have, $900 quintillion worth of platinum in it. So it's worth it in the long run. It's
right.
just a matter of actually having the platforms, the space elevator, the moon base, like all of the foundational technology in place to actually go
We're
do it.
getting there, Josh. Just in the last 20 years, we have seen the commercialization of space take hold, and it's no longer the sole, domain of national governments.
I hope we get to. We need to get off this planet. Like an asteroid hits us and we're done. We need to get off this planet. Like that's kind of the hill that I'm on here.
Okay. I'm going to hit you with another one out of left field here. I want to talk about education. I would love to see in the short to midterm a real good fundamental overhaul of the learning objectives and structure of our basic elementary and secondary education system.
I can't disagree with that, because our education system is broken, like to the point where I'm relying on them to do the very, very low level stuff, teaching my kid what math is, and then I'll do the part and fill in the blanks on why it's important.
Now, I don't want to fall into the Enlightenment now trap here and say that, oh yeah, it used to, maybe it's the best it's ever been, but we can still do better.
At the same time, if we were really motivated as parents, we could have our kid going to Khan Academy for free on the internet and stuff like that. But
now,
it's just a time thing.
We've talked a lot about the limitations of material science and, the actual knowledge and things we're able to accomplish. But some things are limited simply because we're moribund, we're tied to the ideas of the past, or even our laws prevent it. And I think that's another thing that has to change. Our copyright laws come from the 60s and 70s. Our laws surrounding, tax laws and stuff like that are kind of corrupt and filled with loopholes. And I would love to see just everything catch up.
All right. So as a very general thing, I'm not going to dive into this. Listeners, don't at me. This is a personal belief that I hold. If you disagree with it, feel free to post on the Reddit and the webpage, but I'm not going to respond to it. And my feeling is that U.S. laws specifically are very business-centric. Like they have businesses in mind and businesses as the beneficiary, and people, like individual taxpayers, as secondary. That's a personal opinion that I have. I have things that I can point at, and there are people can point at 100 things that go the other direction. This is just my perspective. I put that in here as one of my list of things. Like I would like the U.S.'s like legal system from the top down to switch its focus from big business and organizations to what's best for people again. But again, I put that in the category of never going to happen.
That's weird. I mean, I hadn't really thought of it that way, and I don't remember hearing you say that before. I don't necessarily object to what you're saying, and if it would make things better, I hope you're right.
Oh, well, that's nice. On a lighter note, I want to talk about cybernetics.
What's that?
Cybernetics is where you take machines and interface them directly into your meat machine.
Oh, okay.
So
all right. Well, where have you got that, mid to long term?
In the midterm, because here's the thing: is we have to know a lot more about how the brain and our nervous system works before this becomes a thing. Because there has to be some conversion between our analog nervous system and the digital machinery that any kind of computer system would have.
Yeah, I see stuff about this. It's usually focused on people who are disabled.
That's my midterm. My midterm goal for cybernetics is that we have artificial limbs like you see in the movies, where somebody loses an arm, and then you can put in, at some point, you have an interfacing device, and they slap on a robot arm that they charge every day, and it works just like their old meat machine arm did.
Now, is it going to be like Winter Soldier, where it's actually better?
Of course. Duh.
Like, we just go around cutting off our arms on purpose?
It's made of metal and got hydraulics. And that's the thing. Like, the short term or the midterm one is artificial limbs for the disabled to get them back to, full mobility if they choose to do that. But then the long term in this that I have listed is the cosmetic version. Like, yeah, if you want to chop your arms off and get, like, super strong or super fast or agile arms, go for it. Personally, I would love to have an MP3 player plugged into my head somewhere where I could just have my tunes going and I can click them on and off with a thought.
What's the limit to that? Is there like what if the key to your immortality question is just to put your brain in a bottle?
That's not a question we can answer because we don't know what consciousness is. Like the can I transfer this consciousness? The idea is no. If we put it into the computer, it'll be a simulation of me. It's not going to be me. It will think that it's me, and from the outside perspective, it will be me. But I will still be over here in my meat machine. Before we get off of this topic, there was a sci-fi book that I read that I loved to death. And in this book, one of the concepts was that they understood the brain and consciousness to the extent where they could install a computer in your mind and they could split your sight and your audio into two separate channels that did not interfere with each other. Now think about that for a second. It's a hard concept to wrap your brain around, but imagine if you could still see everything around you with your eyes like you are now, but then also be surfing a web page or reading Wikipedia and have both of those things simultaneously with one not in interfering at all with the other.
I kind of get that. I mean, I definitely know, like, if I'm in traffic and stuff gets dodgy, I reach down and turn off the radio so I can see better.
Yeah. No, that's always the joke, and people do that, and I do the same thing. If you really need, like, the processing power of your brain, you start, like, eliminating other distractions. Yeah. But for the rest of the time when you're not driving, if you're sitting at your desk, it's like having two monitors. Being able to look at two different things at exactly the same time would be super helpful.
Okay. I've got a few more we haven't talked about yet now that we're starting to transition to long term. I know there's some we're working on right now that I think could really revolutionize a few things we haven't talked about. One is evacuated tube transport.
Oh, the hypertube stuff.
Yes. Basically, we could take a capsule and put it inside of a tube that's been sucked all the air out of it, so now there's no friction. You can levitate the capsule with magnets, and now the theoretical limits of how fast this thing can travel are somewhere in the like 4,000 to 6,000 mile per hour range. You could set up a network with routers and route people and objects around the planet like we do packets on the internet, but instead of doing it at light speed, we're doing it about 6,000 miles per hour, which is a lot slower, but it still makes it possible to go anywhere on Earth in a matter of hours.
Man, all I can think about is the amount of kinetic energy that's being carried with you, and like the tiniest flaw then turns you into mist.
Yeah, I get that. And that could be a joke in any movie we make, or where something travels at light speed. What if they accidentally went through something that they weren't expecting along their course?
Man, I'm already making that joke in my head where it's like, oh, you'll never get me on one of the hyper tubes. They're gonna hit like a pebble, and then like my kid's like, oh, whatever, old man. Like flying an airplane like an old timer. Get there tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how in the past, and maybe what we're doing now is just another version of that. They thought that the future meant flying cars. They're like, well, before we were on horses and now we're on cars. That meant we could go slightly faster. So what if we could just also fly in them? Like, it almost feels like too small of a cognitive step.
I literally don't trust half the people out there with the two dimensions that they have in their car. I'm not giving them a third.
I get it. Yes. I don't feel like the future will be flying cars. I don't think that's where we're going. What the things that are going to be flying are drones moving objects around.
There's a possibility of, I think, automated public transport that flies. I can see like a city bus being like a helicopter drone thing.
Yeah, maybe. I feel like there's still too many problems with that until we figure out like weather and other humans and stuff like
Other
that.
humans.
I mean, if we can,
you're right. You just shot the whole thing down. Literally shot it down because of other humans.
if we can control all of those things, but that's why I think it's going to be something else, like evacuated tube transport and tunnels and stuff like that, where you just have something where you utterly control every factor in the environment, and then you can send it almost as fast as you want.
Well, if we're talking long term, the long term, like almost sci-fi, I feel like, is complete energy independence. In that we have attained Type 1 civilization?
Yeah, so I'll put a link to that video in the show notes, because after you told me that, I didn't know. Basically, that science fiction have theorized in the future the advancement of the human race, if you're to distill it down into a single idea related to our usage of energy, there's phases, types that we go through. You know, at the lowest levels, we're just getting a little bit of energy from the sun, and at the highest level, we're able to harvest all of the available energy of the nearest star and go and harvest energy from other stars.
Yes, I think that's Type 1.5 or Type 2. I'm not sure. But a Type 1 civilization has full control of the energy produced, I think, either on their planet or by their star. One of those. I'm just going to focus on the planet. Like, if we can just have, like, enough energy to the point where it stops becoming like a utility and it's just a thing that you have. We just have energy, electricity, heat, power, whatever that you need. We just have it. It is a given, and it's free, and it's just here and abounds. Like that would be a wonderful thing for humanity to have.
We just have dilithium crystals, and we can do warp drive.
Well, like you're talking about before, with like the disparity between the haves and the have-nots in nation state levels, where there's still entire swaths of the population of humanity in countries living without electricity, or living without consistent heat, or without telecommunications. If we can abstract all of that away, and how many Mozarts, how many Einsteins are being born into poverty, into some third world village that just never have the opportunity to develop into what they are, because they're constantly focused on sustenance, like just living from day to day.
I love it.
Yeah, if we can remove that as a factor, like our entire species will benefit.
So we've been talking about medical technology that has the power to prolong human life and increase the quality of it. About computerized technologies that enhance our ability to access and utilize information. About transportation technologies. About our ability to get off and explore other worlds. About our access to energy and our ability to use it. And I think there will be more conflict in between now and this utopia that we're talking about. But our ability to harness all these technologies and use them for good do give those promises of being able to be whatever you want, do whatever you want, live your life in peace and harmony, live out your dreams in a way where you can just be a positive contributor to whatever good there is that's being had. Does that also give room for those who desire to exploit and corrupt? Probably. We've been very optimistic here on the Bad at Magic podcast today, Josh.
I just want to live in Star Trek. That's what this all boils down to. Everything I'm talking about, I just want to be in Star Trek.
Yeah. Well, to bring us down to earth a little bit, we're going to review a book next time. I need to give the strongest possible content warning I can give about this book. The book is called Trejo, My Life of...
Crime, Redemption, in Hollywood.
Crime, Redemption, and Hollywood. It's about the actor Danny Trejo. It only came out 2 years ago. He's still alive, but it is a memoir of his time and life. He has lived a very rough life. He spent a good portion of it in prison and addicted to hard drugs, and had some very rough times in his life. And this book set a new record for F-bombs of any book I've ever read. It's probably in the several of hundreds.
It is such a versatile word, Ben. I don't know why you don't just accept that. Like, it's so useful in day-to-day language.
I am not saying that because I don't think it's a valid vocabulary word. I'm saying that because I'm cautioning my mom not to try to read this book.
Fair enough. Moms, there's a lot of F-bombs. If you're okay with that, then read it. If not, we'll try not to drop as many F-bombs in our review of it next episode.
So I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Josh. Some really interesting things come out of it. If you heard us talking about the short, mid, and long-term future, and you want to weigh in and give your 2 cents about what you think the world of tomorrow can or should look like, you can go on our subreddit and comment on the open thread I put up for each episode, or you can go on our Facebook page and weigh in on the issues or the things that we put up from this episode.
If you like what we do, consider sharing us with a friend. I feel like if you like us, maybe your friends like us too. If you really want to show us some love, consider taking your phone out of your pocket right now and giving us a good rating on the podcast player of your choice. It is crazy the amount of visibility we get from those things. And if you want, like, my Bert to be Ben's Ernie from now until the end of time, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page.
And until next time, try to be a little less bad at magic.